Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to our episode on light. Our reminder that this episode is not medical advice. And this particular topic originated from a question that you, Jessie, texted me, that you needed a theme for that day's yoga class. And I texted back with just one word: light.
And that word light opened up a watershed of ideas and inspirations that led to, number one, an amazing yoga class. So everyone listening should go to my YouTube channel and check it out. It's a restorative class open to everybody. And it's very inspired and relates a lot to this podcast. And this idea of light is hope and light is possibility. But we're also in a season of light, this being recorded in December and a time of many celebrations of light. But it brought in an exploration of a beautiful children's book called Happy Birthday to the World, which is about seeing the light in everyone and everything, and seeing with our hearts and connecting with light. And so in this time in the world, that is a beautiful inspiration. And we invite you to share in a conversation with us about the light and all of the things that light can mean and how to bring more light into your life.
I want to add in that the author of that lovely children's book is Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen.
And you can stay on for the mindful moment because I'm going to explore it during the mindful moment. It's something I've taught many a yoga class on and explored in mindfulness. There are so many invitations in her writings, both this children's book and her other writings, and we'll put a link to her resources in the show notes. The intention of today's episode is to explore all the different facets of light, seeing things in a new light, shedding light on new things, and beginning to look for the light in everyone and everything, including yourself.
We hope that after listening, you'll put down, release, maybe let go of some of the heaviness that you've been feeling, even in this particular moment, and hopefully feel lighter and ultimately more hopeful.
We'd like to offer, before we begin our discussion, a moment of pause, a moment to slow down and arrive. And today, a moment to connect with the light within. And so if it's safe for you to do so, you can bring a hand to heart. And if not, merely take a moment to pause, to connect with your breath, to come back to your body, and to settle in and enjoy the rest of today's podcast.
Jumping right into the exploration of all the different facets of light. Even though this is the darkest time of the year, it is quite a season of light. So the trees bring in their own light by brightening up their leaves into yellows and reds and oranges and even browns. There are more candles and fires and fairy lights, the golden light at dusk, and more moonlight. At this time of year, we can choose to celebrate light, much like many other human beings from all around the world having their own unique cultural celebrations of light.
And realizing that it is the darkest time of year. So many people are focusing on the negative energy of the long, dark days. And yet when we shift our focus to the light, our experience of those long, dark days changes. And light is actually what allows us to see. And this is a metaphor also, because that heaviness and burdensomeness and the clouding and the covering up of the light keeps us from seeing and keeps us from that clarity. And so the light, even amidst the dark, there's always light. And that light is what brings clarity and allows us to see what's ahead.
In fact, the darkness allows us to see the light sometimes even better. And we can always connect with our inner light. Mindfulness helps by bringing in stillness. It allows us to slow down. So, similar to a jar of swirling, muddy, dirty water, when this jar becomes still, it allows the dirt to settle and the light can come through the water as the dirt is settling. Society, however, normalizes busyness, doing more, and so it takes practice and intention to bring in that stillness and slowing down for ourselves so that we can bring in the light.
And I think if we don't slow down, we miss the light. And I know that we have that light within and we just tend to be in that swirl. I often talk about the snow globe settling, and since it's winter conversation, that tends to have, most of the snow globes have these sort of sparkly lights, same idea. And so that light can only be seen when things settle. Oftentimes it's occluding the light. I live in a foggy part of the world sometimes. And again, there's the light and the sunshine above, but you can't see it amidst the fog. And so I think this invitation of slowing down can very much help. A lot of people get caught in the spin and not being able to see their inner light or not being able to connect with their inner light because we're so busy and there's such an overlay. And so this invitation of slowing down in stillness as the way to find it is magical. And the light actually is magical. I'm thinking about the fairy lights and really thinking about this light. Light in and of itself is light. It's not heavy. And so directing your attention to it can really shift things. We also want to invite all of our listeners to consider shining your light even brighter. And we did an entire podcast very early on in our podcasting career about shining your light and fear of shining your light and feelings of perhaps guilt, blame, and shame when you shine your light bright and you stand up tall. And I think many cultures have lessons to be humble and not shine your light. And many families, mine included, the message was to not shine your light too bright. Oftentimes for fear that if we shine our light, it might dim someone else's light, and or how shining our light might impact someone. And we offer very often that when we shine our light, we often give others permission to shine their light, and we offer them hope and inspiration. And so generally in this world that we live in today, I believe that more light is better and more shining is better. And that when we shine our light out into the world, we are offering a gift to others. And I want to add that I believe that this podcast in and of itself is an example of us shining our light. And we hope that it will inspire you to shine your light in your own way.
So I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about shining the light on different cultural celebrations around the world. As always, our podcast has set the intention to be as inclusive as possible. So we wanted to share a little tidbit about some of the different celebrations of light from around the world. So this segment largely is sourced from the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, where they are doing an exhibit on all of the different light celebrations from around the world. And so I will share some of this with all of you. So starting off with kind of the earliest, if you will, of the light celebrations in the latter part of the year is Diwali. It's known as the Festival of Lights, and it is held on the darkest night of the Amavasya moon cycle. And basically, this symbolizes the victory of light over darkness, good over evil, justice over injustice. And each year, Hindus and Sikhs believe in that story and those themes of light over darkness. And they observe this during the lunar month of Kartika, which is usually in November on the Western calendar. So to celebrate Diwali, people set off fireworks, they hang strings of electric lights, and they light earth and oil lamps called diyas. And there are exchanges of gifts and sweets and fruits as tokens of good wishes for each other. So Hanukkah celebrates the Jews' victorious fight for religious freedom in 165 BC, and priests found only one small flask of holy oil for rekindling the temple lamp at Jerusalem's temple. So instead of burning for a single day, the oil miraculously lasted for 8 nights. And so to commemorate these events, annually the Jewish people light a 9-branched menorah, and this ritual has given the holiday of Hanukkah its nickname, the Festival of Lights. And then there's Kwanzaa. So a little bit later than Hanukkah this year. It's an annual celebration of African and African American history and cultures, and it's based on some of the ancient harvest festivals derived from Matunda ya Kwanzaa, or otherwise known as first fruits. One of the 7 candles is lit daily, starting with a unity candle, and then the candles alternate red and green, reciting each principle until all the candles are lit. And on the 7th day, there's like a feast with food and music and dancing and singing and gifts as a new cycle begins. And then there's one of my favorite celebrations of light, Lunar New Year. It's a major holiday in East Asia. It's also known as a spring festival. It commemorates the beginning of the first new moon of the lunar calendar and ends on the first full moon. And it's about 15 days for many countries that celebrate Lunar New Year. And so red is a big color that's prominent during Lunar New Year. It's seen as a lucky color. There are lots of firecrackers and gatherings and exchanges of red envelopes filled with money for the children to help to keep them young. And then there's Ramadan. So Ramadan is in the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, and it's observed as a holy month of fasting and spiritual cleansing for Muslims. It commemorates the beginning of Islamic enlightenment, where the Prophet Muhammad received the revelation of the Quran, the Muslim holy book. And then there is Eid, which is on the next full moon. And this is the conclusion of the month of Ramadan. And there is gathering as well, and praying and reaffirmation of unity. And then there's our own winter solstice in the West, where there are markers of celebration for the shortest period of light of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. And this event marks the point at which the sun will grow stronger and daylight will increase in the days after. And even with Christmas, the celebration of the birthday of Jesus Christ, oftentimes there's depictions of baby Jesus in a manger, and there is a light that is above him. And this light is thought to be the Star of Bethlehem, which was thought to be an appearance of Halley's Comet. And so interestingly, a lot of these celebrations of light have to do with celestial events, namely about the moon or other heavenly bodies. And so even thousands of years ago, when there wasn't electricity and there weren't fairy lights per se, It was the darkness that enabled our ancestors and other people of the world thousands of years ago to see the light and to celebrate the light.
And I think we often talk about full moon and the light, and just what happens in medicine. There's a lot of superstitions around babies being born on the full moon and the harvest moon and celebrations of being women and all kinds of things in the moon, which are, so I think there's so many other invitations for light. The other light celebration that came to mind is during the holidays, there are many gardens, for example, that do celebrations of light. And having been to a few and having really enjoyed them, what reminds me, they're about mindfulness. When you sit there amidst the light and just notice the way that things can look different and how you feel when you're amidst the light, even amidst the dark in a garden, and noticing the light and directing your attention to the light and enjoying the light and celebrating the light is a bit of a mindfulness practice. You have to stop and notice, or the light is there and you don't experience its energy. So an offering there to perhaps go enjoy different lights and celebrate them, and notice your interplay as a human and your energetic interplay with the light. Which brings to mind one other thing. So interesting. There's so much to explore here around light. I'm just thinking around seasonal affective disorder and the way that our energy changes with the light, and acknowledging that literally for most humans, having less natural daylight lends to a less bright affect. And for some people, it's quite significant. And just having compassion for our human response to light, and what our cells clearly respond to light. It's not just the weather, it's the actual light amount of daylight and what that means for us. And also allowing yourself to notice what time of day the light is more helpful. I'm a morning person. Morning light is my magic creative light. Evening light, not so much. It might be magic to look at, but it's not energetic for me. And so I think noticing how your body interplays with the light. And a pivot here to coaching and the light. Coaching, the way that I coach, at least, I bring in the light quite a bit. And I loved this idea of coaching as an invitation to see things in a different light, from a different perspective is the invitation there. And telling very specifically and very intentionally stories that are different, stories that are lighter, stories that are less heavy, that have a something that feels lighter to you and maybe doesn't make things harder or worse or make you feel negatively about them. And so coaching is very much an invitation to learn and to practice, and to then by default and more inherently and naturally show up for your life experience looking at things with a different light. Many of us in medicine were taught to look at things with the gray glasses, and putting on the pink glasses, the rose-colored glasses, is literally an invitation to see things in a different light. The other light interplay that mindful coaching offers is this invitation to bring things into the light that you haven't connected with or seen, things that are hidden, connecting with your intuition, what your actual true wants, desires are, bringing the real truths into the light. Oftentimes we realize that we haven't been authentic or honest or with ourselves. We've been doing shoulds rather than wants tos, and bringing into the light thought patterns that you didn't realize that you had. And so this invitation of letting yourself see things, which you can only see with light, as we mentioned above, is a really powerful tool. It's also an opportunity to connect with your inner light, learn how to shine your inner light. And one of my favorite quotes is that the world does, it's not about what the world needs. The world needs people who come alive, which to me, and that's not an exact quote, but that's the invitation of the quote. And when we come alive, we shine our light. And that is absolutely what the world needs. And for many of us, we don't know what that looks like. And so coaching is an invitation to figure out what your inner light is. What light is it that you want to shine? I also find many of us aspire to be light or feel light. In fact, light was one of my words for the year, and it's often a word that people aspire to have. And the invitation of that is to feel less burdened and to engage in the mindfulness concept of letting go, releasing, letting go of stories that are heavy. Sometimes it's letting go of stuff and clutter, actual clutter or brain clutter or emotional clutter, letting go of thought patterns and beliefs that no longer serve you. And it's also letting go of feelings like guilt, blame, shame. These are things that are just rampant in the culture of medicine, and many of us grew up with them. They also come with many religions, since we were talking about religions and cultural traditions about what one should feel guilty about. And feeling light is an invitation to let go of any of those things that add to your not feeling light or feeling heavy or burdened. And mindfulness, one of the tenets of mindfulness is, or John Kabat-Zinn's attitudes, everyone has a different way of saying it, and bringing these concepts to light, is this concept of letting go. And then the intention of either being the light or being a lighthouse for others is something I work on with many who struggle with relationships, struggle with people they love who are struggling with mental health issues or struggling with other things in their life. And whether this is you as a parent and being the light for your child, a beacon of light, or a spouse who's struggling, or aging parents are struggling. And when we are a light, or as I like to say, a lighthouse, rather than out there rescuing people, being that zodiac raft, when we're there shining the light instead, that is the way that most of us would like to show up for a relationship. So setting an intention perhaps to be a lighthouse or a beacon of light is very powerful in shifting the dynamics of challenging relationships, and something that comes up in coaching a fair bit. And the last go ahead. Do you want to say something? The last invitation of the light is inspired by Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen and her invitation of seeing the light in everyone and everything. And I will share in the mindful moment parts of her story about there being a light in everyone and everything. And that when we see with our heart, i.e., slowing down and being mindful and setting an intention to look at the world with a more loving lens, we can see the light in others. And in coaching, a lot of what we do is shift our focus away from that negativity bias of things and other humans, shifting it towards seeing the light. And as you mentioned in what was the first celebration you mentioned? The one about the light being good and the dark being bad.
Oh, in Diwali.
In Diwali, thank you. I was like, it came to me. That's, I think that seeing the light in people is an invitation to see the good. And so I love that there's a cultural celebration that seeing the light also is similar to that.
So mindfulness, bringing in light and mindfulness and connecting all of that, is a means by which we can access our own light and see the light in others. So paying attention on purpose to the present moment harnesses that capacity to see and experience what's real and true just as it is without judgment. So using the spectacle analogy that you just shared with gray colored lenses or rosy colored lenses, mindfulness allows us to see with clear lenses, with clear glasses. And we use our own inner light, our authentic self, to do this. When we use our own lens, our own perspective to experience the world and add on mindfulness, it's kind of like a squeegee wiping off a dirtied windshield. When we can let the light of others in through our own lens, and only when our own lens is clear and free of debris and dirt. That is how we are also better able to emanate our own light. And then similarly to what you just shared, doing this will help you see life with new, fresh perspectives within a new light, literally.
And after practicing mindfulness, I noticed this specifically at the Sagrada retreats, we do a golden light meditation. And when you walk out, same scenery as when you walk back, after you practice mindfulness, you literally see things sparkling in the light. You notice little things that you didn't see. And so mindfulness allows you to literally see light and see sparkle and see the world in a completely different way. And you notice the water on the leaves or the way the light shines on the leaves that you didn't notice before. And so it's literally a way to see things in a different light. The other invitation of mindfulness that we haven't talked about in terms of light is holding things lightly rather than grasping or rather than pushing them away. That hands wide open to me is an invitation of lightness, and just holding potentially heavy things lightly, holding decisions more lightly, not letting things impact you and weigh you down quite so much. And I use that invitation of hands wide open a lot when you're thinking about relationships with others or things that didn't turn out as you hoped they would.
Yeah, it's this hands wide open analogy enables us to have choice in whether or not we release or set down, versus grasping, which can get really tiresome and also heavy. And I also wanted to take this moment to honor the origins of many of the formal practices in mindfulness, and that's Buddhism. So there's also another celebration of light called Visakha Puja Day, which comes in the spring. And this commemorates the awakening of Siddhartha Gautama, henceforth called the Buddha or the Enlightened One. So this celebration is in observance of Buddha's newfound loving kindness and compassion. And so there's a lot of ceremony and ritual and honoring during this day. And it does settle in as well as a day of the full moon in the 6th lunar month of the year. So this date commemorates Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and death.
Notice the word enlightenment, right? Mindfulness and coaching help you be enlightened, literally.
Yeah, and most recently, I shared a picture of a cloud formation that I saw on my way home from clinic one day. And it was, for me, a cloud formation that looked like someone was dancing. And there was no editing that was needed. There was no filters that was needed to be able to see this cloud formation. And it was very clear to me it had arms and 2 legs and a body and head. And I had never seen a cloud formation like that. And so it reminded me of a quote by Amit Ray that goes something like this: life is a dance. Mindfulness is witnessing that dance. So there's a lightness to that analogy as well. There's a playfulness.
Yeah, dancing is literally feeling light in your body. And so while much of what we talked about today is in your mind and ways of seeing things, you can also feel light in your body. Many of us feel heavy things in our shoulders. And I invite yoga as a practice to literally find lightness in your body and let your body feel differently. And to me, when you dance, that's light. You feel light in your body, you feel free. And so I loved when you shared that. And you, I believe, initially shared that in the Mindful Healthcare Collective. And so for any of our listeners who aren't part of that group, we invite you to join us. It's a large group of people who work in healthcare who are interested in many of what we share here in this podcast, and learning different tools of mindfulness, how to practice it, mindful opportunities. And much of what we share in this podcast is inspired by things that come up there, as well as in our other work in mindfulness and coaching. We'll put the links in the show notes.
It's an opportunity to interact with both of us more directly and see what's on our mind, oftentimes day to day. So we hope to find you there. You can also find out more information at mindfulhealthcarecollective.com.
We will end with our reflection questions, knowing that when we reflect is actually an opportunity for integrating. And this podcast offers this opportunity to integrate and to practice in a couple of different ways. It's not merely about listening and consuming. We invite you to pause early on. We invite you to practice with our mindful moment at the end. And we invite you to reflect so that you can soak in many of the learnings and what you just heard and carry it forth with you beyond just your listening moment. How might you like to see things in a new light?
Where might you want to shed light on things in your life?
What would you need to change to start to better see the light in everyone and everything, including yourself? If this podcast today and our perspectives and work resonate with you, we invite you and encourage you to work with us and join us in some way. This podcast in particular was inspired by the yoga class on light, and you can find that on YouTube. All of my yoga classes that I teach live most Saturday mornings, and any of our podcast listeners are welcome to join us, get recorded and end up on a YouTube channel also. And they are there for you to enjoy and explore many of these podcast themes. So the link to join me live for yoga will be in the show notes, and the link to join me on YouTube will be in the show notes. And these classes, the yoga classes, are literally me shining my light out into the world. Each week, there's a different pertinent theme that's relevant to enjoying a more light and happy and whole life. And I know from many people who attend that they feel lighter. Maybe they are physically lighter after practicing with me over time, but that these classes are really an opportunity to change how you feel in your body as well as your mindset. They are more of an experience, I would say, than a yoga class, and I would love to have any of you join me. And if you would like to feel more light, as we mentioned multiple times in this podcast, both coaching and mindfulness help you do that. They help you see things from a different perspective and let go of heavy thoughts and habits. And I would love to work with any of you either one-on-one, in a small group, or at a retreat. Mindfulness and coaching are magical if you want to move through the world more lightly. And mindfulness is an opportunity to do that as well. You can learn that at retreats. You can learn that here with the Mindful Moments. You can learn more about that in the Mindful Healthcare Collective group. And so we invite you to reach out to us, join one of those opportunities. You can bring one or both of us to speak at your institution and share some of these learnings as well. We're available to do that and love shining our light and shedding new lights on the practice of medicine and the approach to physician wellness and burnout.
Join us in September of 2024 at our Connect in Nature retreat. It's actually the current only opportunity to work with both of us, unless you invite us otherwise. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us some stars and reviews. This helps others find us. And we are going to close our podcast today with a mindful moment. And incidentally, in our over 170 episodes of podcasting, we actually haven't defined the mindful moment. So I wanted to just share that it's our way of shining our authentic selves into the world. And that as of today, 105,000 invitations have been sent to practice mindfulness. So what exactly is it? It's a short, very intentional mindfulness practice of a different variety of ways to explore different types of mindfulness practices. It's either led by one of us or our guests. It's our gift to you, our dear listeners. It's a chance for you to grow a mindfulness practice for yourself. So instead of any of the subscription apps that you actually have to pay money for, why don't you join us for free by staying on after the sound of the singing bowl and practicing some mindfulness?
The light in us honors and reflects the light in each and every one of you. We hope you'll join us next week.
As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or uplevel your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely.
Welcome to today's mindful moment. Today's mindful moment is going to be an exploration of light and lightness and feeling light and noticing that we can see the light in everyone and everything. And so I invite you, if it's safe to do so, to close your eyes and notice the light already behind your eyelids. And notice the soles of your feet on the earth or your sit bones on your seat, on your chair. And take a moment to arrive within yourself. Taking a moment to enjoy. Take a moment to notice any lightness that you might feel already. And I want you to bring a hand to heart and another hand to top. Taking a moment to wish yourself well and connect to your own heart space. And for today's mindful moment, as you sit and breathe, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, I wanted to offer some words from Rachel Naomi Remen, who is a physician, who is a New York Times bestseller. And these words come from the author's note of her children's book. And the children's book is about the light in everyone and everything. And it's about seeing with your heart. And in my mind, seeing with our heart is connecting with light, connecting with hope, connecting with possibility. And when we see with our heart, we feel much lighter. We have let go of the unnecessary burdens and heaviness and tightness and tight casings. And so while you sit, coming back to the breath, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, sit and settle in and listen. Listen mindfully, coming back to your breath whenever needed, and if possible, continuing to keep your eyes closed. Because when our eyes are open, we see with our eyes. With our eyes closed and our hands on our heart, we see with our heart. The birthday of the world is about healing the world one heart at a time. It is about seeing with your heart. If you see with your heart, you can heal the world. How do you see with your heart? Seeing with your heart is not something we are taught. It is a capacity that we are born with. It is something we remember, but sometimes we forget how to see with our hearts as we get older. Like your eyes, your heart is an organ of vision, a way of seeing. When you look at everyone and everything with your heart, you see things that you would not see if you only looked with your eyes. It's the difference between seeing things in black and white and seeing things in color. When you remember and begin to see with your heart again, the world fills with color. You see the light that is hidden in everyone and everything. When you see with your heart, you notice things you have never noticed before. You can see below the surface of things, the appearances of things, and discover ordinary things and extraordinary things in ordinary people. When you see with your heart, you see what is hidden. You see the beginnings of things, the seeds that will one day become a mighty forest. When you see an acorn with your heart, you know that you are holding not a little woody thing, but a great tree in the palm of your hand. To see with the heart is to see the future. I see the light in you, dear reader. You are enough, just as you are, to heal the world. Seeing with your heart allows you to see the light in everyone and everything. And those words are in the author's note of Rachel Naomi Remen's book, which is called The Birthday of the World, a story about finding light in everyone and everything. And so I invite you to take a moment with your hands to heart, coming back to the breath, and consider what it would look like for you to see with your heart. Perhaps closing your eyes to see with your heart. When you see with your heart, does the world feel more light? Do decisions feel more light? Do the burdens and heaviness lift? Taking a breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. May you see with your heart in the week ahead. May you see the light in everyone and everything. May you see the world in color. May you see hope and possibility. I wish for you all a beautiful, light-filled holiday week, filled with hope, love, and connection. We'll see you next week. Namaste.